These are really valuable stories and important stories, and they're stories that are often hidden. If we think about women in music in general, they're not very present. And if we think then about black women in music, even less so. So I think it's vital and critical that we share those stories and we put it out there. And we show what these very influential women are doing and have done. So just quickly across the panel, we have Ruby Ann Patterson, Henrietta Smith-Rolla, Karen Gabay, who is also chairing today's panel, Yvonne Shelton, and Melanie Williams. Thanks for coming down. Please do remember that you can ask questions. I'm sure that will take place at the end. Enjoy the panel. I'm sure you'll get a lot out of today. Thank you.
Thanks, Alison. I just thought I'd start by saying a little bit about what each of our panellists have done in the past. So, starting off with Ruby Ann Patterson, who has been a solo artist and now sings with Family Ranks and also runs a network called Mank Nubian. Henrietta, who I always thought was a seamstress, but she's but you're a musician and you're with Afro-Dutch and Sisters of Transistors, which I love the name. And Yvonne Shelton, who is a vocalist extraordinaire, who has sung with many artists as well. She sang with Evolution, which was out of Manchester. But she also sang backing vocals for many artists, including Gloria Estefan, Take That, Heather Small, and she's just revealed to me. Melanie, yes. And the Spice Girls. And Melanie. And Melanie, who many people know for singing with Sub Sub, that Manchester classic, but you also sing with Butterfly Jam, solo artist, and yet you sing with Yvonne as well.
Yeah, that's right.
So we're saying we're all connected in many ways. So the first question, though, because I know people come into music through sometimes through strange kind of avenues, but people on this panel all come into the music business through different ways, and it's quite interesting for black artists. There's also the other conundrum of when you tell your family that you want to do something in music and they just think you're a little bit crazy. So how they actually came into music is quite an important question. So Mel, I just want to ask you, how did you fall into being a vocalist?
It's funny actually, because I was a forceps baby, and I always feel like I do get dragged into things. I didn't plan to be a singer, but apparently, according to my next door neighbour who had the next door bedroom, I was always singing, and she was always banging on the wall and telling me to shut up. So that wasn't a good start. But I did actually just bump into Eric Gooden, who ended up being my writing partner for many years. At a party, and they said to me, "You look like a singer. Can you sing a few notes?" And I refused, and then eventually I did. But what it did was I started to write. I'd always been a writer, and they invited me to come and rehearse with them, and I started hearing songs immediately and writing them down. It's like a dam burst. And I just knew that this is what I wanted to do. And I sort of very quickly started writing for the band. So that's how I fell into it. I'd go on forever if you don't stop me.
And then, Yvonne, how did you fall into it?
Oh, my ring's coming off. For me, it was, I've always sung. People in my family sang, but I started off in a gospel choir and a gospel group. And we rehearsed 6 hours, 3 or 4 days a week for 6 hours with a break in the middle. And when we performed, people who were producers in the audience would ask if they could have me to sing. And the more and more these other secular music sessions I did, then I got kicked out the choir for singing the devil's music. And then I met Eric. My uncle knows Eric, and he wanted my uncle to sing, and they asked, Barrington asked if we would join you guys on a session, and then it just took off from there. And I've done backing vocals, because in gospel choirs you learn to harmonise from that high by ear, which helped me with the Hassie and the classical, because they just give you a book of music and you go, oh my God, 67 pages of dots. But it was through a gospel choir, and the lady, the overseer's wife, saw that we were okay and got us an agent, and our first major gigs were Foreigner and Patty Austin and Stevie Wonder, and so it's been downhill from there. She wanted us to stay in church and sing, so she got us big gigs, but a lot of us ventured out.
It's quite interesting that the getting kicked out of church happens a lot in the UK as well as it does in America. That's how we've got Misha Paris and people like that as well, isn't it? Kicked out. Your background is slightly different as well, because you're, in terms of the panel, you're an electronic kind of baby, aren't you? So
I moved to Manchester like 12, 13 years ago for love. Didn't work out, and but decided to stay, and it was just Manchester that did it for me, really. I wasn't making any music when I got here. I'd moved up from London and I was working in the industry. I was working for management companies and labels, but always had this thing where I needed to be in music but hadn't found my place in it, really. And it was moving here and just meeting people and just happy accidents. The Sisters of Transistors thing came about. I'd gone to see a friend play in Stratford, and we were in this bar having a drink afterwards, and a friend of mine, Graham, he was like, yeah, I collect synthesizers and drum machines and things, and I'm starting a band. Do you want to be in it? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know how to play keys, or I've never used a drum machine before, but I was just in that thing where I just wanted to say yes to things because I wanted to be in music. And I didn't tell him until about 4 years later that I didn't know how to play keys in the band, and I didn't know how to use drum machines, and his face was just like, what? So everything's been self-taught. But it's definitely Manchester that's meant that I could do that. I don't think I could have done that in London. It's just a very encouraging environment up here. So it's all kind of like self-taught, but I use Ableton as like my base structure for making music, but also sort of like sing and things. So whenever I get asked to do something, I'll just have a go and see if I can do it. So that's kind of how I got to it.
So Ruby-Ann can't lie, because I know how she started, because people told me to go and find her. So let's see if you tell the right story, shall
Well,
we?
I think that I wasn't that confident really in my musical abilities, and I didn't really think that I was particularly anything special. And I probably still, I don't really know what it is, but Karen Gabay and Yvonne Shelton was my singing teacher at school. And so I think it kind of, you said before, you bullied me, and I definitely needed the bullying. I needed somebody to be like, hang on, like you can go and do this, because I think for a young black woman, I just didn't really have that. Couldn't find that kind of anywhere. Everybody wasn't really telling me that I could do it. So, and Karen got me on the radio and doing various different projects. I did Holly Youth Orchestra project, which I think kicked everything off for me, and then went on to support Gregory Porter, Candy Staton, Charles Bradley, and the rest is history.
Yeah, so what's interesting is about sometimes you're not given opportunities, or you're not aware. It's not you're not given opportunities. You're not aware of the opportunities when they land in your lap, particularly if you're either from a working class background or from a black background or mixed race background. And I remember I went to school, was really good at music, had opportunities with the Halle choir, with the Halle orchestra. And my uncle in London got it, so I was always in a studio from a little child, but my family here didn't understand it. And I was asked to do a project for Channel 4, an 18-month project to give the opportunity to 75 children across the UK, across Manchester, to take part in this project. And when I went around the schools, everybody kept talking about Ruby-Ann and said, oh, she plays at lunchtime at Wally Range, and she's really, really good, and she beat everybody on the X Factor, and you need to find her. And so I had to go back into my old school, and I found her, and she was amazing. And the conductor from the orchestra said, actually, even though she plays guitar and a bit of piano, we can work her into the orchestra. So she was given the opportunity to do that. but it was still me ringing her all the time, going, where's your form? But it's just that thing of that sometimes that's all it needs, you know, that kind of like push to kind of push through. And obviously you then went on to be a solo artist, but then again it's still been finding your identity, hasn't it? And then
Absolutely. I don't think it stopped. Started working with. Well, I kind of finished that kind of part of my life and started working with a band, 7-piece, all men apart from me, and that's definitely been a narrative changer and something that I'm still learning a lot from. So yeah.
And what I want to ask you about is it's quite interesting about finding your identity in those scenarios. Like for you, it was in a classical scenario, which is a kind of a big leap if you've never been in that form, you know, that format, like you in an electronic scenario. So how hard is it to find your identity when, even like, I don't know, in the first 5-10 years, how difficult is it for you to find your identity as an artist? Particularly if you might be seen as a mixed race or black artist, how people want to see you as opposed to how you want to be.
I mean, if I definitely, being mixed race, I sort of, like I said, I was pulled into it, found myself, I was hearing sort of whole songs, and I really sort of connected with Eric Gooden, who, like I say, became my writing partner. And so I'd go over to him and I'd say, have I stolen this song? Is this, because I would hear it, the best songs that I would write would come very quickly. So it would almost be like tuning into a wave band. But I thought I was ripping them off from something, because I didn't realise that they were original songs. So I sort of had to go and ask somebody I trusted whether that was an original song. And then I'd sing them to Eric, but then when we'd go into the band, all my confidence would disappear. And these were my toughest times. I couldn't express myself in the band the way that I did privately. So I had some very embarrassing moments trying to channel my voice through. And it was, funny enough, I bumped into Diane Charlemagne in a studio, and she really nurtured me through this recording session. And this sound was coming out. I was very, very stylized, and I felt that my voice didn't fit, it didn't sound gospel enough or black enough, and it didn't kind of sound white either, and I felt like I was falling down between two stools. I mean, Yvonne as well, when Yvonne came into my world, we just had this sound that we used to make together, and she always said, she always encouraged me as well to say that you have your own unique thing. But it took me quite a while to trust that, and I had to go through quite a journey every time I went in the studio to sing, and every time I went to do a show, I would go through this whole process of self-doubt and also making the mistake of thinking I should sound like someone else, and sometimes I think the is when I tried to be like someone else, that's when it really didn't work. So, and it's still a work in progress. I am still sort of working at connecting with myself and coming home to myself and going, okay, how would I really authentically deliver this? And what's my thing? When I will listen to someone else and think, oh wow, why can't I be like that? And it's still like I say, a work in progress.
Are you talking sound? Are you talking visually?
Both. Really.
Both. I think coming up as a singer, coming up as a teenager in the gospel choir at school, it's that thing of when you're growing up as a young black girl, if you see one black person on TV doing something positive, like Oprah says, you ring round the whole of your family, you scream from the flats, black person on television, black person on television, or coloured person on television. It's on now, turn it on now. So by the time you go back and watch it, it's nearly finished. So it's like looking at how they looked, looking at how I looked. Some of them were glamorous. Some of the portraits of black women in television or music wasn't that fantastic, to be honest, but they always sounded, if you saw a black person singing, it was a maid. whether it was Bessie Smith or Billie Holiday or whoever. Then you got the Diane Carrolls and the other Dorothy Dandridges, and they look more glamorous, and slowly this image of, I never saw an image that I thought, I'm not going on there doing that. That's what it means to sing. It's like, I just hang around in the background, no problem to me. And then the idea of black women and beauty, I have to mention it. You know, when we've been shaded out for so much, and the 70s we popped again, and then before that it was Egypt, 4,000 years ago or whatever. And so we're redefining and refinding our idea of beauty, and it's a blend of what we see, European women, Asian women and black women, because we are all a blend of that. If you're from the West Indies, trust me, there's not just one culture that you're birthed from. So to embrace all of it, but to have that black stamp on it. And vocally, we know what people want. You go into studios and you're asked to do a guide vocal or a ghost vocal. You've done it. And then the artist sings that. We used to go in Square One and do that for loads of different people.
Yeah, ghost loads of remixes, but not, you wouldn't be credited because you were making it smoother, richer, deeper, sweeter, and just ghosting the vocals, isn't it? We did loads of that.
Yeah, and so, or asked to actually sing the song so that it can be presented. When I worked with, Gary and Howard from Take That, that was my job with them, songs that they wrote, to sing it well enough so that an American artist or a famous European artist would sing it well enough to make them want to sing it. So from very young, my role was very, very clear. When we did Foreigner, the girl that was on tour with them, they pre-recorded my voice so that she could sing over the top of it when they heard Spice Girls. Sorry, ladies. We went in and we recorded ghosted their lead vocals for the tour. So, it's, and I could, there's not enough time. I could sit here and just mention and take up the hour, but I know that visually we're either in a corner by a speaker, or so I always accepted it, I didn't mind, but then it's realising that you're good enough to stand there at the front. If I'm encouraging people, 10,000 young people, and Ruby sticks out in my mind so much because of how unique her voice was. Her voice is a blend of her culture, who she's from, and then she adds an edge to it. When we took her to do some singing for some other people, the guy who wrote "Oh Happy Day" just made a beeline for us so quickly when he heard her voice. So we know what they want. Melanie's just said it: bitter, sweet, pain, beauty, everything. So anything that your voice can express, that's your job. And so, yeah.
But what's interesting is that it's coming out a little bit now in terms of rap artists having ghost vocalists, ghost writers, but I think people in the audience won't be aware of just how many acts have ghost singers. Standard. 20 Feet from Stardom highlighted how the backing vocalist was need to enrich, but All Saints, there's so many girls allowed.
I had to do a showcase to prove that I was the singer, the writer, and co-producer on and the look of the Temper album. Well, I had to do the scariest showcase at Ronnie Scott's, where I could have ended my career in one night. You were there, weren't you? You were there. I was passing out in the back room because there'd been so many exposés like Milli Vanilli and what was that? There was I can't remember the others, but there was like one after another.
Well, it's people realised that Boney M was all the Frank Farian thing came up, didn't it? Yeah,
that was that, and so there was it was going around in the press that I was a hired-in model that wasn't really the voice or the writer of, and that Virgin were kind of trying to give this charade. And so I had to do this showcase where they invited like everyone from like all the radio stations, all the press. And so it was like, end your career in one night if you did a bad show that night.
Well, they put a lot of money into artists, and so because the record companies are guilty of having a lot of women, mainly black women, I've got to say, but women of other other cultures as well, doing all this ghosting and guide vocaling. You know, anyone that they put money into, they have to do a showcase. You know, even though Heather Small sold 15 million records, when she went to New York, she had to do a showcase so that the labels could see that, you know, Mike Pickering hadn't, you know.
Yeah, I know Beverly Knight said she learned she went to Nashville after having a successful career and also made sure she could play piano because she was asked to do a showcase to Europeans again to prove herself.
Yeah.
So, but it's interesting because I think I've been to a lot of showcases and I'm not sure the same onus is put on a white artist to do. You know, they can have a listening party and it's fine. And the other thing is maybe Black American artists can have a listening party and it's fine, but it's felt that taking a risk on Black British artists is a huge deal for companies.
Because of identity, we look to the Americans so much. When it comes to gospel music, anybody that listens to me, even if it's not typically gospel, they know that. So because we look up to them so much vocally, and then it's like you say, pulling back and finding your own voice with the influence. You can't help your influences, can you? So we've been made, even though we've been the backdrop vocally for a lot of artists that have sold a lot of records, they want you to prove yourself as a standalone singer.
Oh, Henrietta, I want to ask you about working in the electronica field, because there aren't many Black females who are doing that. So I'm just quite interested in terms of, you know, you were saying that you self-taught, so you were trying to find your own way. Yeah. But how did people kind of like deal with you in that field as you were also trying to make your own way? What did they expect from you?
I think it's been a really interesting, quite fascinating sort of process for me, because I'd always loved electronic music. I've loved all sorts of different types of music, but electronic music sort of spoke to me in this like crazy way. And just going back to sort of identity, trying to find my place within it. It all sort of began when I started looking for my dad. And I grew up in Devon in the 80s. And it was me and my mum. My mum was 16, I was 2. And we were the only Black people in the village. So I had to sort of understand and try and figure out my identity very, very quickly, because I had to figure out what a look meant, because I was the first Black person many people had seen. I had to use it as like a defense mechanism. It's like, is that look threatening? Are they just curious? Are they attracted to me? It was all very like having to figure out identity very, very quickly. But as I got older, I started to realize that I needed to look for my dad, basically. And it turns out, he's from Ghana, I'm Ghanaian, and he moved to Germany in the late 50s on a scholarship to paint. He was an artist. So I was like, why was a Ghanaian man in Germany in the 50s on a scholarship to paint? You know, very sort of odd sort of situation. And bearing in mind, I've been obsessed with Germany all my life, just obsessed with it. And it comes into a lot of the electronic music that I'm into. It turns out that the Germans and the Russians colonized Ghana from the 1500s. So before the French, before the British. So there's a long history of German sort of culture and Russian culture within Ghana specifically. And turns out I'm Russian.
Who knew?
Yeah, who knew? I found this out. So my great-great-grandfather is Russian. My surname is Rolla. It's spelled R-O-L-L-A. It's spelled phonetically. Rutler. It means role play actor. So it was all. So this all sort of this story, this sort of trying to find my identity started to make more sense. And the word that kept on coming up when I was doing research was Afrodeutsch, which simply means African German, which I kind of am. And I liked how androgynous it is. It's just a word, it's just fact kind of thing. So having that as my identity within the electronic world has actually been really helpful, because you don't know if I'm a man or a woman. You know, I show up, oh, Afrodeutsch is a woman. There you go. You know, and it's one of them where I'm self-taught and I have to be completely in control of my output and what I'm learning. And so technically when I show up to a venue to play, the looks that you get when you're just setting up your gear, just setting it up, and they're just looking over, going, yeah, that goes in there. It's like, I know, I know where this goes, you know. And so I think that might be just a symptom of the type of industry that I'm in, rather than it being a black thing and being a women thing. And I think for me personally, I don't feel black in Manchester. This is the point I really wanted to make. I just feel myself. There's no boundaries. There's no sort of, you know, lines crossed or anything. I feel black when I leave Manchester, when I'm in an airport. It's like, you know, I come back to Manny Airport and I'm like, yes. It's like I don't have to deal anymore with looks and, you know, that kind of thing. I've had really odd experiences in airports, going into Paris, and they had 2 queues, and they had the kiosk ahead, and there was 2 guys, and they were ushering people over, you know, to check your passport to come in. And somebody walked ahead of me, and then they just left it with me for ages, and they were just looking at me, and I'm like, hi, you know, ready to go. And eventually ushered me over. I handed my passport over to this guy. He looked at it, laughed, handed it through the kiosk to the guy who was sat next to him. He laughed at it, he passed it back, and he threw it at me. I'm like,
at least you're not in strip shirts.
Or had your luggage like slashed open.
yeah, and so it's just this thing where I don't feel like I'm of any colour when I'm here. It's only when I leave. So I just wanted to make a point of that, you know, identity-wise, it's like you can be anything here. And I love that about Manchester. So well done us.
And Ruby-Ann, how about you? How do you feel about, because identity is kind of core in terms of what you kind of do now, isn't it? So have you always felt that you've had a struggle with your identity and how that relates to you musically?
Yeah, I've definitely always struggled with my identity. I think I kind of felt akin to Melanie in that sense. My mum's from Liverpool, my dad's Jamaican, and that kind of created that divide at home, and definitely translated into the way I approached the world. And I don't know, I think I found it quite tricky. I went through 3 different stages of wanting so much to replicate or mirror what I saw other women do in the industry. Like you were talking about this glamorous look and thinking that was me, but I don't know, I think I've not really come to the conclusion yet, and I don't think I ever will. I think more my identity is a travelling thing, and it's a continuum, and it changes just like everybody else's. And yeah, but I definitely did struggle, and I do now still. Yeah.
Is that because of, as well, how you think, you know, you're just talking about how people want you to look, because, you know, you have to put your work out there, whether you've been solo or as a band, and are you worried about how you're portrayed in your videos, on album covers?
I think definitely the switch between being a solo artist and being in a band helped for me to be able to step back and my actual physical visual image be less associated with my music, and for my music just to be as it is. And I think we made a very conscious decision with Family Ranks to have more of we use like characters and kind of like you might have seen them, they're like drawings of us rather than actual photographs a lot of the time, because for me, and why I pushed it was because I don't necessarily want this, as you see me now, to be a meme, a selling point for my work. And I'd like to think that I could get to a point where people will just hear my music and see what they feel because of that, rather than the way I look.
Now, we can't have this discussion without talking about racism, though, about if you've experienced racism. Well, we know you'll have experienced it, but kind of like, what, maybe been a crushing moment when you've dealt with it, had to deal with it, so I just wondered if you had to deal with it, Melanie, in terms of...
Well, in a sense, it was a bit different for me, because my father's Jamaican, my mum's very like a real English rose, and I was sort of removed from the black culture that I had was up until I was about 4 years old, when I'd spent a lot of time back and forth in London, but I was moved to, similar to you, I moved to Wilmslow, and I was the only little girl of colour in the school, in the sort of in the Wilmslow. And my mum, I mean, I've actually just had a keratin treatment on my hair, so but when I wet it, it will go into a huge afro. And so my mum always used to comb my hair in sections. She was white, but she could comb out any afro and plait it, because it was so huge that it couldn't be contained. So I had all these plaits in my hair with different, because she thought it was lovely to put different coloured ribbons in them. So I turned up at school and everyone stared at me, and the older girls used to chase me around the playground, but they only wanted to touch my hair, but I'd be in the corner crying, feeling really, really intimidated. But I sort of go back and remember that actually I can recognise that energy wasn't horrible. They were just genuinely fascinated. So I didn't feel that there was sort of an unkindness, that I was targeted. And later on, when I was singing in the band, I felt guilty because I hadn't had experienced racism at that point. And that I remember it was Viv Dixon who went on to sing with a guy called Gerald. She came back from a job interview, and she came into the rehearsal and she said, didn't get the job, what usual reason like that. And all the rest of the band sort of nodded, and I sort of went, what reason like that? And I remember Viv looking at me and going, where have you been? What's up with you? But I was really confused, and I felt like I felt a bit guilty, and felt like I was, that I'd had. Eric said to me, "You've had your culture bred out of you," and I felt like I had to reconnect and claim it back, and I had to claim it back in my voice as well. So and for me, it was all about connection, and it's about doing it the way I feel to do it, because I was going through all this, crisis of performing and feeling really, really nervous about expressing my songs. And somebody said to me, just look over everyone's head, pretend people aren't there. And I remember the first time I went on stage, and I was thinking, right, look over everyone's head. And then I was like, that is so not me. And I remember I was singing, and I looked in someone's eyes, and then that connected me. And there was this connection with this woman. And then I just started looking, and then I always go out to the crowd, and that worked for me. It was like this energy was just going from one person to another, and it was like this shared experience. It was like not about ego or anything, and that's how I do it. And also, if I feel like I'm losing myself, I have to close my eyes, connect back in, and then connect back out, and then this flow happens. So it's finding that was authentic for me. So for me, it's kind of almost like letting go of identities and these superimposed identities, and finding connection. Everything's about connection with me, connecting to the tuning into a wave band, letting the songs download, and then sharing them, and letting go of how that's perceived, letting go of how, if I'm connected and I'm authentic, then it's not really my business how it's received. It's everyone else's choice, their own choice.
You've got to wonder, in terms of you experienced it, in terms of also what you expected to sing, if you wanted to take your music down another avenue, and that can be racism within the black community as well, who also don't want you to sing certain styles of music.
More than racism within the black community, it's a pressure to make sure you put that black British sound, the DC Lees, the Karen Wheelers, the Misha Parises, all the different. Rachel McFarlane is very, 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 very American gospel. She took her to America and shut her eyes. I think she was an American singer, But the people that have got a proper, like Ruby Ann, I've not heard your vocal or yourself. There's a black British sound, so at least do that, or sound where they think you should come from. Have reggae roots, have funk roots, have your gospel roots, and then they forget that we've watched opportunity knocks. We've watched New Faces. Now it's X Factor, The Voice, and Britain's Got Talent. And we've been drenched in English pop and Motown. We've been drenched in it. So when I sing, you can hear that. You can hear those influences. You can hear that I love a truckload of English or white American singers. You can so hear it. I remember doing a session where Peter Blue said, "Oh, you sound like a white girl." I could have kicked him down, and I thought, well, why wouldn't I? For this particular song you've got, why wouldn't I? It lends itself. But if you play some chords or just tell me to sing Amazing Grace, you can hear that. I was raised in gospel. You put on a reggae song, man, you know my parents listened to reggae music. You can, so it's a blend, but you are expected to deliver a bunch of ad-libs they could put on 10 albums and tell you they're putting it on one record, and they splash it over 10 albums and not tell you. From a PPL or PRS standpoint, there's an issue there. But who do you think you are? It's none of your business. You know, you just come, sing for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 hours because you can. Do all the things we think you should do, and we might pay you, we might not. Just be glad you were let in our studio, and then it's an issue of identity, and it's an issue of self-esteem, and it's an issue of respect from others. There's so many things, so you have to, as a young person coming through, the thing with what Ruby says with identity moves me the most, because you're expected to be glamorous and beautiful, and then the lighting shit. You're expected to have this look and this thing, and a makeup artist says, "Oh, don't bother with her, she's just a backing vocalist." You know, there's so many things where you just think, where you get shot in the face as a black person. Like Ruby's mixed race. Ruby's mum's English, and her dad's West Indian. So's Melanie, but look at the difference. Melanie's mixed race with an English mum. Ruby's got an English mum, but the difference in experience will be just as far apart, you know. And then I'm a black girl. My great grandfather was a white Jamaican, but I'm a black girl. But and my difference is very different. My experience is very different from Melanie's. We could both walk through the airport. I'll get strip searched and Melanie might not.
I've been strip searched as well.
Yeah.
This is a nightmare. But
but it's just different. The way Melanie's treated in the industry, everybody here will think, of course my experience is different from Melanie's. She's got a different story to tell. She can barely speak of racism, and I could spend 5 hours talking about it. That's the difference.
Well, the other thing is, I also think on top of it is there's another side of it in terms of when people want to dismiss somebody as even being in the black arena as well. Yeah. And that's also, you know, another element that sometimes I see through working in television in particular is that even your artists going around your daily business, but somebody might say, if I said, oh, you know, I wanted a group of singers, and they might just kind of view it as, well, you know, Melanie's a pop artist, well, why is she going to sing anything that's related to gospel? Or, you know, would she really sing this kind of style? And that's, you know...
I'm going to interrupt you. A guy called Noel Robinson, Juliet Fletcher, says, let Yvonne do the BVs on this. And he says, knowing the gospel choir that I came from, but because I had this song out with Evolution, oh, she's too poppy. And I could have punched him in his face and said a million swear words. But he has not got a gospel voice. As a gospel artist, he can't, number one, in my book, I don't care what anyone, he can't sing, but he's got away with it. He can preach, but he sings as well. Oh, she's too poppy. And I could have took the microphone and shoved it.
and equally, it was I'm with the band at the moment. Working with a great bass player called Morgan, and he said that with the whole thing that we do with Butterfly Jam, which is a whole other thing, and he was like, "Damn, I didn't know you could sing like that." He said, I just heard Ain't No Love. That was it. That's all, and that kind of impression of you know, that people don't know all these different, there is so many yeah, and there's so many aspects to one's, all the tracks that one has done, and then you have a hit, or people just remember the hits and they don't know the other dimensions.
It's not somebody stopping you from earning a grand a day somewhere. It's someone that will stop you from earning decent money. If it's my bass player and my keyboard player, I'd just say, oh, fuck off.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the attitude, and also I think then when you're pushing for that, people then think you're pushing a certain agenda. But it's also to say, we're not all just one style. These people aren't just kind of one style. It's like I was talking to, somebody about Josephine Onimaya, and it's like, the mouth falls open when you say it's somebody who's like sings folk and it's black and is from Cheetham Hill. It's like, but why not? You know what I mean? That's the.
Bob Marley's a folk singer. Isn't it?
Yeah.
You strip away the bass and drums. It's a folk singer. You listen to Bob Marley songs. That's folk music. But when it adds Peter Tosh and whoever, and the brothers are on the bass and the whatever, it's a hefty reggae band.
So I just wanted to ask you about in terms of how you might be perceived even by other black performers in R&B. Other black performers who may expect you to do kind of like R&B or dance. That must also kind of like be an interesting conversation that you have.
Yeah, it's a really funny one because I didn't realise I was a singer until I was asked to do it. And again, it was Manchester, and it was meeting sort of people who were just really encouraging and would have really interesting projects, and they'd be like, can you wail on this, can you sing on this, and all this kind of stuff. And it was, I realised that you do get typecast in things, but I was actually all right with it because I hadn't tried a lot of stuff, and it was all about just really trying things. And I had, I think my favourite jazz gig, I was playing with a band called Toolshed, and we do like covers, Morricone covers, and there's like it's like punk and just like a huge band and just loads of horns and drums and all sorts. And it was one of those gigs where I had to really just take myself out of myself, if that makes any sense. It's like when we'd had a few rehearsals, I was really nervous, but I wasn't singing in that kind of black voice that was expected of me. Do you know what I mean? So I loved that gig so much. It was just like joy gig. And at the end of it, friends of mine who are musicians, who play, who are really accomplished, just turned around and went, I didn't know you could do that. And I'm like, neither did I. Neither did I. And one comment was you just sounded like Grace Jones. And I lost it when they said that, because obviously I live for Grace. I live for her. But it was that typecasting thing. It was like, so you sound like the next black woman that I can remember, that I can think of. So in a lot of ways it was a massive compliment, but also it was like I was being pushed into this sort of bracket again. But I think people, it's like if I'm in a situation where someone asks me what I do, I tell them I'm a producer. I make music, but they assume that I'm a singer. First off, oh, you're a singer, and I go, I can sing, but I'm not a singer. So I think it's quite. I think you do get typecast. People assume quite a lot of you when you're a black woman in music. They assume that that's what you do, and so it's. I'm not alone in it completely, but it's just that thing of where, I'm realizing that there are few black women making electronic music and being producers in the way that they're working for other people as well. Do you know what I mean? It's like, so I'm a solo artist, but I work on other projects and produce other people's music, and it's another interesting thing of like figuring out how much of myself I'm putting into a project, and thinking about, how much of it is actually about the people that you're working with, and you realise that you're actually a facilitator. So there's so many different dynamics when it comes to electronic music and being a producer, like how much you're putting in of yourself, and just like identity within that, it's like a constant wheel of identity crisis.
I mean, can I add to that, because because I do everything, because I don't play, but I do everything in my head.
Yeah.
And so my husband, he's now my husband, Joe Roberts, who is my partner in Butterfly Jam, he would be my musical translator. So I would, and we've become almost psychic. So I'd look across at him, or I'd whisper in his ear to translate and say, "Can you change those chords? Or can you make it more? We'll change the sound? Can we do this?" And he would then translate it into musical terms. So a lot of the time, people wouldn't realise what my
Your
input
was,
into the albums, or the and in fact, one person, there was a press release a while ago on the Butterfly Jam album saying tracks written by Joe Roberts. He hadn't read the label copy, and so he although I am credited on the album, and me kind of wrestling sometimes with my ego, wanting to tell people, and then thinking, well, no, but I do feel it. Sometimes I feel like my ideal sense is when I don't feel the need to go, oh, actually, I did that. I sometimes I do sort of say, oh, actually, no, it was a co-write, or if you look at the label copy. But when I feel really good is when I feel like I don't have to necessarily sort of go, excuse me, and
Hi.
hi, and I can sit comfortably and wait and be patient, because it will out and people will find out. And
When it's your husband's.
no, but I mean in general.
No,
the,
but I mean,
the
your
public,
husband's
yeah.
written. Your husband knows that you co-wrote it. So eventually, in the interview, say, actually, my wife wrote it with you. But if it wasn't your husband and the guy didn't say anything, which is usually, what happens, or even if even if you had an input in writing, I didn't know. After 35 years, some of the things that I stood back in vocals on, I wrote the flipping chorus. Now everybody's claiming stuff. I thought, God, if I was to go back and think, Paul Heaton, there was no chorus in that song. I put it in there, you bastard. I still sing with him. But you don't even know what you're entitled to. You just think, we just want to get the track done. So I don't think it's your ego. In this climate where women are barely mentioned, I think it's not ego. It's just, I understand you being cool about not saying anything, but for the next generation, we must say something,
Well,
we mustn't feel it's ego. So that Ruby's got an easy, Henrietta's got an easier time. We've been doing it for 35, 40 years.
When it comes to making sure that your songs are registered and I'm actually having a really tough time. I've been onto PRS saying, how on earth now on PPL, if we now have to, they've taken it out of the hands of the record companies, because they were, like you said, not honouring all the musicians. It's down to us now to make sure that we're registered, to make sure that I've got a lot of copyright come back to me as well. It's down to me to make sure that artists are, I've registered the artists on my records as well. And I'm going, and where are we going to find the time? And also, I would never do that to an artist. If I use their vocal or, sample a vocal, I'd be on the phone saying, I've used your vocal. One, is that okay? And two, it will be registered. Having said that, I've had a ton of works come back to me now, and I need to actually spend some time tracking down where I've been sampled and used on tracks. Do I have the time as an artist right now? No. I'd need to take about 6 months off to make sure that everything was registered properly. So I'm not quite sure how we're going to get around this one.
Just to say as well, apparently in the Northwest, women are really bad at doing that with PRS. The statistics are like 2% or something really, really low. But I think the other thing is I don't think it's, I think Yvonne's right, because, if you don't say, you're not making history right, because what always happens is someone goes back to that article when they're researching it, and then that information's out. I mean, I understand your scenario, but also I don't mean so much. I don't mean like when it's down to sort of publicly. But if I'm in like a room full of people, and I don't really want to go. Yeah.
I prefer it when I don't feel the need to have to sort of go, you know, I did that, and you know, I did that, in that kind of scenario. I don't mean...
But men do.
On.
And I was just going, so the whole point, I think men do. And also...
Yeah.
And then the other thing is that I know that in the point that Yvonne's making is that also people are going back now on saying 30 years ago I wrote that, because it's quite interesting. Like Sylvia Moy, who died this year, who wrote she basically saved Stevie Wonder's career. Motown were going to get rid of him, and she wrote a song that saved his career. And I spoke to her, it was like My Sharia Moore, and I spoke to her, and she said to me, she was ill though, so we couldn't go see her, but she said my credits were taken off songs. So I went to the guy who was the A&R guy for Motown, who we were interviewing, and I said, Mickey, is this right? He said, yeah. So it's not, so you know, it's like corrected, but she's not the only one. And I know that some artists are going back now, like Neville from the Specials, you know, and they're now going, I wrote that black element of that song. I know I didn't say it at the time, but we're having a resurgence, and I want my money.
Yeah.
Or I want my credit, even if I don't take the, you know, we're all part of the group, but I want my credit because, you know, also when it's, you know, this heritage thing, when it comes back around, people are talking about a certain loop or a certain sample.
But they may have to take off that 6-year only back claim, and maybe that's a way around it, where they actually, you know, you got longer to investigate. I know there's a section where you can go and look at unclaimed works, because there's a lot of dodgy stuff going on with holding on to royalties.
But I think why it's particular, why it's a good point to raise it in terms of black women is because, say in reggae music, which has got an issue with copyrights anyway, it seems that the majority of people who were done out of copyrights and recognition are the black women. So it seems that reggae is a field that only, you know, that black women are a percentage of, like maybe like 5 or 6%. But when it turns out that when you look at it, that, you know, a lot of women wrote the tracks and they've got no credit whatsoever. And it's the same in terms of when you're talking about in classic hits, you know, American hits, you know, women that names are taken off it. They're just not credited for tracks that they were key in writing. So, you know, the point is that... Or performing. You know, Bananarama are a good, you know, a good act to note, because, you know, if they wrote La 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 La, they got the credit for it. Apparently as well, they just were like, it might be a silly little part of the song, but we came up with it,
well,
you know.
That's why it's important, though. I'm supposedly a good businesswoman, which I'm not actually, because I've seen good businesswomen and I realised that I'm not. I was just the most business-minded in my sort of group. And I do make sure that things are registered, and I do make sure that people are credited and that they get their royalties. In that instance, I'm very organised. However, I'm finding it hard to keep up in this day where, you know, women. As a woman, I feel like I'm stretched about as thin as I can be, and if I clone myself about 10 times, that there still wouldn't be enough of me to do all of the things that are on my to-do list. That's a big issue for me.
I mean, does your work get sampled? Because, you know, electronic work is quite easy, I think, to kind of like lift off.
Yeah. It's a funny one as well. I think, like, with the platform that I use to make music, it's so readily available that the thing that I find with it is that I'm always trying not to sound like the piece of software that I'm using. So it's throwing loads of things into it and just using it as like a bass tool. So I wouldn't say things being sampled and used in like just sort of taken from my work, but there's definitely, like, you've got to be really careful in the fact that you're using a platform that hundreds of thousands of people are using, and, you know, it's just that thing where when you arrive at it, you need to have something to make using it. That doesn't make any sense. That does make sense. Yeah, it's just that thing. You can't just arrive at a piece of software and go, let's make music, you know. And it's about making sure that you don't sound like this piece that you've just been given. Do you know what I mean? So I don't. Maybe people have used some of my music. I don't know. But yeah, I don't sample stuff. It's all sort of original things. Yeah.
Ruby, I wanted to ask you about, in terms of how you're perceived within, like, family ranks again, just in terms of when people, when you walk into festivals, you do a lot of festivals, or when you walk into gigs, Do people expect you to be the rapper, or what style of music do they expect to sing? Do you have a lot of perceptions around that, or are people just quite open to you as a musician?
I don't know. I don't think they think much of me. I'm quite like.
They don't think much.
No. In terms of like, they don't think. I don't think people when they see me think of my involvement in the music making. They don't really see that. They're quite happily. I had an experience at a gig not that long ago in Leeds where I got off, literally poured my heart out on stage, did what I thought was, credit to myself as an artist. Came off stage and various different people kind of went to talk to the musicians that play instruments in the band, and they said to me, "Oh, I like your outfit." And I was just like, is that really all you have to say to me right now? I think they don't really realise how much other stuff it takes. It's not just, congratulations, you got dressed this morning. Like, thanks, But, I wouldn't like to say that. I definitely think all of us have a part to play in the band, but I do think that obviously I have my identity and the way that I want to sound, and I definitely push for that, and I definitely don't shy away because I've heard these stories of things happening. I don't shy away from saying, no, I wrote that part, and this has been heavily influenced by me, and I told you what to do there because I know, because I can hear it. And same, I don't speak in the musical terms that a lot of the musicians in my band do, but I definitely don't shy away from that. Yeah. Did you have a similar experience?
I had a similar experience. I played at the White Hotel a couple of weeks ago supporting my dream band, so electronic music, Detroit techno, Doppler Effect. I don't know if anyone knows Doppler Effect, but I supported them, best gig ever. And I put so much work into this set. I was so nervous, and I spent like 3 weeks mastering and EQing and going into everything and practicing. And I finished this gig and I am buzzing. And this guy leans over the railings and goes, "You going to play any good music?" And in my head I was like, that's kind of the best thing you could say after this gig. And I just pointed at the DJ and just said nothing. And there's this thing, like, people just want to take the piss. It's like they can't let you have it. It's like, you're a woman, you've just done this, I've heard it, might have liked it, might not have liked it, but I have to get my dig in. Just can't be, "Oh, nice one," or just say nothing. "You're going to play any good music?" Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting that I know that a lot of female artists, or, it's the same if you're at the controls, like I'm at the controls, that it just like really throws kind of like men in the music industry. It's like they just don't know how to deal with it.
Heads fall off. Literally like that. What? What's happening? Yeah. But I find it fascinating and I kind of enjoy it. I like walking into a space knowing that I've done all this work. I've thought about this. I haven't just shown up and put a record on and whatever. It's just like I've really spent a lot of my time and a lot of emotion and a lot of work. And then when you have those little digs, it's almost like, I don't know, there's almost something good about it, because you're making these people react. Do you know what I mean? It's like they're just going, "Oh my goodness, there's a woman doing this thing, glitching in the brain," It's just like, yeah, kind of like, I like that. I like turning an audience round, like Dead Faces. I'm not gonna like this. And then by the end of it, like, yes, I love that sort of turning things around. So I don't know how much that's got to do with being women and being black, but definitely like making people switch and think and sort of react differently or have a reaction to stuff. Yeah.
Now, one question I want to ask you about is in terms of, you all think content with the music that you make, but are you content with where you are in terms of recognition, in terms of how much kind of exposure you get, in terms of, do you want to have more mainstream exposure, or do you feel that you've overlooked when it comes to getting those calls, to appear at festivals or events? So I just wonder what your kind of like thought is on that.
I have been having this feeling for quite a long time that maybe that I don't fit into what they kind of want or expect. They kind of want a particular mode of a black or brown female woman or whatever performer. and I don't really fit into that. But at the same time, I don't just sing the choruses. You know, I write songs, and I rap a bit, and I do that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's very strange ones to try and navigate, really, like how much involvement I want in it, and how much I'm willing to let them control for me, if you know what I mean. So yes, music is what I kind of want to do, but it's more than that to me as well, and it's definitely about saying something. And I do realise that a lot of that makes me maybe not as mainstream as I don't know, a singer that wants to sing, I don't know, like love songs and ballads, and that's cool. Like, and I've done that. I've definitely done that and had that part. But I realised that that's not quite. I wanted to say a little bit more. So I think that's definitely made me less bookable. But that doesn't necessarily mean I've having bad experiences. I'm enjoying the things that I'm doing, and I think in terms of recognition, I don't know, is it that important what everybody else thinks of me, or is it more important what I think of myself? I think it's probably more important what I think of me and who I'm the person that has to live in my body, so kind of care about that a little bit more. It would be nice for the wider music industry to take note of women doing amazing things, and not to be like a beeline, you know, like, I was talking to Leigh, who's a really close Leigh full stop, who's a really close friend of mine, and we were saying a similar thing, like, wouldn't it be just really nice to just be like, have someone ask you the question instead of it being, what is it like for you as a woman in music? What is it like for you as a musician in music? Like, that's the goal, you know? And for it to be less of a kind of afterthought. I don't want to be an afterthought anymore. I want to be the main event, and along with other men in the industry that take up a lot of the conversations and the dialogue and the narrative and the space. Yeah.
I like that line, the main event.
The main event. That's going to go on my thing on Twitter now.
What was the question again? Do you want to be more mainstream? Would you like to kind of like be more visible in terms of being mainstream or getting those big gigs, you know, like a Calvin? Would you like to want to you know, would you like that kind of a platform to be playing to bigger crowds? Do you feel that you get those calls, you get that opportunity?
Yeah, I think it's another sort of interesting one for me, because those thoughts do cross your mind, but then I always go back to this thing where I realise that all of us women here, and anyone who's making music or in the music industry, you have to be super brave, like brave all the time about your choices and your decisions. And it was the moment that my music started to make sense to other people and to me was the point where I was literally sat in my studio at home, and I had to tell myself not to think about what anyone else would think of this rhythm that I'm making right now on my own. You know, it's that point of going, I care about what people think, but not enough for it to affect what I'm doing. So it's like really taking hold of your own thing and having confidence in that. And you have to be really brave when it suddenly becomes your output. Suddenly you're giving it away, and not to concern yourself with how people receive it. It's always got to be about yourself and being really strong in your narrative and what you're thinking in your process. So the idea of being popular or successful in this sort of electronic sort of world has crossed my mind, but it's not my motive, and that's the main thing. It's like, if it happens, it happens. And for me, the way that my working life has turned out is that I've only got work off the back of previous work that I've done. So it's always about just being completely confident and really understanding what it is you do, so that people can basically work with that. I don't have an agent, I work alone. So it has crossed my mind, but I know it's not my focus. So it's very much about what happens after the work that I've just done, the project that I've just done, the people that I've worked with. You know, it worked in that way. So it may happen, it may not, but it's not my motive.
Both of you have been on both sides of the fence. So, like, Melanie, how do you feel about it now, having been in the mainstream, but also been able to live, underground, yeah.
Well, the first album that I made, and Yvonne sang with me on that album as well, on the Temper Temper album. I mean, that was considered a really, it got a lot of attention. I mean, for me, I was signed quite young to major labels, and I've been on a sort of a massive journey of thinking I was in control, and doing all this I'm an empowered woman thing, and then realizing how far I'd actually drifted from my original space. And I'm with you guys. It's been a journey of really noticing well, I said yes to that, and that was, I meant no, really, because that I no when I meant yes, and then I've said no when I mean no. That feels a lot better. Because I was signed quite young to big, I was signed to Geffen Records, and then Virgin, and then Chrysalis, and I was actually raised in the studio. So I was kind of, I've discovered being free later. I didn't have the same money and finances, but I've found along the way that when I'm really clear about what I'm doing, I'm not really easily swayed. I've got much more power in my voice, and I can whisper no, and my no is heard. When I'm lost, when I get lost with myself, I can easily get buffeted around, and I start to worry about. I've noticed if I'm worrying about what other people are going to think about what I've just done, then I probably need to go and readdress what I've just done, because I find that when I've done something creative and I'm buzzing off it, I don't actually really. I'm like you, I want people to like it in an ideal world, but if they don't, if I'm really connected, I feel as in love with that piece of work as I do, say, with both my children. You know, I couldn't choose between my son or my daughter, and but they're very different. But I feel like that about all my songs are like my babies, you know, so.
Final word goes to Yvonne.
Uh-oh. The roles you get aren't the roles you get. There's always more to it. People say, oh, she's just a backing vocalist. You might be someone's psychiatrist. You know, you might be somebody that's there for them in many other ways. You might be there, so you might have to give them, someone who sold 20 million albums, you might have to give them, borrow them 100 quid. You know, and then as you're coming up, singing lead or singing backing vocals, everybody's mentioned it before, you've got to be happy with it. But as you get older, and we started when we were 35 years, I'm 50, you know what I mean? So as you get older, you get a house, and I haven't got parents that I can borrow £4,000 off, or £1,000 off, or 50 quid off. I've always been the one that's helped my sisters and their children and my parents. So the more you work in the industry, the more, if you don't live at your parents' house, you're not living in a flat that you might be signing on the dole on the side, you're paying a mortgage. Your responsibilities grow with your age, and then you have to get, you know, you make a decision as to whether you do something else that pays, or the gigs that you're doing have to pay. I can sit here and listen to, you've got to be happy with it, and that is the bottom line. But you've got to cover these bills that are coming in thick and fast. And your families, you put yourself in the position of responsibility. You've got, those things have to be sorted, and I would prefer to do what I love, paying those bills and supporting my extended family, and being happy about the vocals that are out there. I have to make sure that I deliver in a way that they're happy with, because I'm being paid or commissioned, but I have to be happy with it too, and I need and where I can, I do lots of things for free, as you know, but there are times when I have to be paid. So people might want to point, oh, she's a money header. No, I've probably sung for you 10, 20 times where you've not paid me, or you've asked me and I've signposted you, but you have to be able to navigate this industry once you get to a certain age where you are not even comfortable, where you can pay your bills, otherwise it's ridiculous. Because I could sit in church and sing, trust me, or walk down, people say, I know when you're coming. I'm like, what, am I heavy-footed? No, you're always singing. So I could just sing to myself. So us sat here means it's something else. Am I right? Yeah. So we have to be happy with ourselves, but there are times when who we're commissioned by or whatever festival we go to, there has to be an exchange, otherwise we shouldn't even be sat here. But we are sat here so that we do receive remuneration for work we feel proud of, and that's and more I don't know what was the word, more exposure, more being the main event. It's taken me 35 years to stand in front of an I've done community choirs and community projects with orchestras, but the first time with the Hasse and the classical, it took me 35 years to stand in front of an orchestra with people backing me. Yeah, I'm singing hits, yeah, I'm singing songs that have been out before, but I don't really care. You know, I sing my songs walking down the road, or I heard in America it sold 100,000 with Lem Cisse. In Japan it sold 25. So what? You know, I'm happy about that. But as a singer, to stand with that orchestra behind me, and I'm not conducting a 300-piece youth choir, it's me singing. I'm glad for the people that I've taught to watch it. I'm glad for the people that I've done backing vocals for to watch it, and I'm glad for everybody that's watched me growing up as a singer to say, yeah, she stood in front of 60, 70,000 people and she's singing the lead. Hallelujah.
Thank you. To be continued.
Sorry, I'm aware we're a little overrun. Sorry about that. But there's so much interesting stuff and we want to continue the conversation. I think we've got 5 more minutes if anybody wants to ask some questions of the panel. You don't necessarily have to do it on a microphone. We can wait while we're unpacking and you can come and approach people in person if you'd much prefer to do that. But if we could just give another round of applause for our amazing panellists. Thank you. And thanks so much for taking the time to come out on a Saturday afternoon to listen to this vital discussion. Thank you. No questions then? Oh, we have one. Sorry, let's get this.
Yvonne, I just wanted to ask about the guide vocal thing. Is it a one-off payment? And what happens? Does the because it's a star, obviously, do they copy what you do? I'm only asking
yes.
Because it just, you know what, it just strikes me that you're like the industry, you're propping up the industry, you're the story that's not being told.
That's why I thought 20 feet from, what is it, stardom, they still work in the industry, so as far as I'm concerned, they barely said anything. They left a lot out, but God forbid anybody asked me, because once my mortgage was paid about 14 years ago, I thought, I don't care, I'll say what I like. Because it's the truth, don't dare ask me. Yes, you provide a guide vocal or a ghost vocal. The ghost vocal is sometimes left on there. That's why that thing with Paula Abdul, I thought, well, she's not going to win. You walk into this industry, the minute they start asking you for that, you know you're not going to get the same royalties as the artist. Please, girl, please, Sister Alice, get out of Wonderland. That's what we all thought that. But yeah, you know, it's a job. It's just like somebody who, you see somebody singing and it's a pop star, an actor, but they can't sing, and someone else might do the vocal and they're, you know, in a musical or a TV show where they're singing La La Land or whatever. But yeah, they use some of your, a lot of your, the guide vocal, they'll use your vocal as a template. They'll sing along to it, and then when they get comfortable, they might sing their own other bits. But usually what you sung, you could, the minute I hear the track, I know that 80% of what I've sung, they're going to copy and then they embellish. And you get a one-off fee. And if you end up being on the record, then you might get, nowadays, the last 10 years, you might get PPL or VPL. You know, and hopefully the producers or the artists might not even know you, but hopefully the producers will put you on, as Melanie was saying, the paperwork, or you'll put it on and they'll verify it.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you, everyone.
thank you to MDMA for organising it.
Thanks.